So this topic is how much does it cost to deploy CRM? And what we're going to do is try to talk about all the different hidden costs for implementing a CRM correctly and what the cost drivers are by phase. So by strategic planning, configuration, training, data migration, what you should expect to pay for integrations and add-ons, what customizations cost, support, and then maintaining your system. I want to start out, first of all, by saying that we are highly recommending cloud-based CRMs right now. There are some companies that still need on-premise for legal reasons, but the reality is that it is actually costing you more money to have your system on-premise than having it hosted by a cloud provider. And the reason why is that cloud CRMs, first of all, you don't have hardware costs. Most of them anyway are designed to be multi-tenant, so they're sharing the hardware costs across multiple customers. There's no hardware maintenance, there's no upgrades of software, system software, there's no upgrades to the CRM software. They are completely scalable companies, Amazon, Azure, Google hosting services, frankly, are incredible. Excuse me, I would not worry about size. Amazon and Azure have dynamic sizing capabilities that you can actually have the system ramp up automatically as demand goes. It provides easier integration as long as the CRM has the appropriate APIs and web services. They're essentially designed for automatic backup. Amazon essentially is nonstop. Disaster recovery is no longer the big challenge it is for an on-premise solution. And even though it looks like you're paying more, you're really paying less in the long run. So the factors in ownership are really along the implementation process. So we'll start out with strategic planning and talk about the cost drivers, what you expect for configuration setup, for training, migrating your data, buying add-ons or integration, customization, support, and continuous improvement. So just to start out, if you're a small business, expect to pay about $10,000 to $18,000 for your implementation. This is typically what we're finding. We're finding mid-sized companies are paying somewhere between $25K and $150K. Enterprise companies, really, it's $150K up, but most of our enterprise projects are in the $300 to $500K range. This is just for the implementation fees, not for the actual licenses. You need to be expecting to pay somewhere around $700 to $1,000 a user for what we call the seats. And obviously, the more users you have, the more it drives the cost of the implementation. There's actually like a curve sitting on its side. There's a point where you get to doing your integrations, and then the cost goes way up. And then there's just a deployment cost that goes on, and it's mostly linear after that. So what is strategic planning and how much does it cost? Well, strategic planning is, there's that great saying, the best thing about not planning is failure comes at a complete surprise and is not preceded by periods of fear and despair. And I love that saying because it's really true. You have to plan to be successful. Otherwise, if you don't plan, you're planning for failure. And there's a lot of different things you have to do as part of your strategic plan. You have to gather up the user stories and map them out in a release plan. You have to document your customer's perspective and experience of working with you. So that's your customer journey map. You have to map out all your business processes, and typically there's multiple sales processes, multiple lead processes, customer service processes, implementation and approval processes, and so on. For every project, you should have a project charter. And when you take all your user stories and build a user story map, out of that falls out a release plan or a roadmap, and you need to have that in place as well. So when you start looking at what is the cost of requirements and planning, on the low end, you might spend $10,000. On the high end, you'd spend $75,000 to $100,000. We had one customer that deployed years ago to over 5,000 people, and it took us 6 months of planning just to get our arms around the project. So it was quite a large project, but then the project took 3 years to deploy. And what drives it is the number of different departments, the number of interviews you have to do, because every department will have interviews, but they'll also have individual departmental needs. I'm a fan of workshops. In the old days, I was a big fan of just interviewing people and getting their requirements, but I found now that you can shortcut that by having a 3 to 4 day workshop and bringing everybody in from that department in one time and giving them a voice. A lot of reasons it gives them, it lets them feel that they're participating, first of all, in the decision-making process, which is always good. But in my mind, there's a lot of value to this, and you gather requirements at a much faster pace. I think what we used to do in a month, you can accomplish in 5 days in a workshop. So very, very important. The number of workshops you have to do, though, varies based on the number of departments and roles that people are having. So we're doing a project right now where we're going to be doing 4 workshops because there's 4 different divisions in the company, and each division does things differently. Number of business processes that must be documented, number of integrations you want to have, those all have to be documented and sometimes prototyped ahead of time to make sure the integration is possible. The number of systems you need to review, the amount of data you need to migrate, and if you're doing data cleaning and data governance, you need to add time for that. We've had data governance projects that on their own be in the $30,000 range because the company wants to build automated processes to make sure their data is up to date. And it's a balance between having data available to you and essentially performance. There's this really weird thing about having too much data, and that is that it sometimes hides the actual information you want to look at. So data governance is especially important. At some point in your organization, you want to start looking at removing or archiving data. So configuration and setup. Typically, we find that it's for a basics, just out of box, it's about $5,000 plus about $2,000 a module just to configure out a CRM. And that is, things like adding the users, adding security, just customizing the drop-down fields that are already in the application, maybe building 1 or 2 processes, not a lot of work. And so that component of the implementation typically, is the easiest part because it's just configuring things. And frankly, almost every customer goes beyond this, but the root cost of that's going to end up being a very small percentage of the overall cost of the project. And you can see we think it's about 11 to 15,000 roughly. For training. And I want to thank Deneen for giving me an animated GIF here on the side because that is very distracting. But effective sales organizations, here's the thing. If you're good at using your CRM, you get better sales performance. And if you are good at using your CRM, you get a consistent consistent approach to working with your customers. So if you're continually getting trained on your CRM, your people are more likely to use it. I'm a big fan of lunch and learn. So after the training, survey your customers and go back and retrain them, or survey your users and go back and retrain them over and over and over again. And as it points out in the bottom, most people don't even use half the features in their CRM, which is interesting. So here's the cost drivers. Number of people being trained, number of different departments being trained, different roles require different training. You don't bring everyone in the training class and train them from a technical perspective on how to use the CRM. What you do is you train people on how to do their job using the CRM. And because of that, every different part of the organization, every role in the company needs slightly different training. So we look at training costs being around $1,500 a day for live training. When you do web and recorded training, it's going to be a lot less, $600 to $1,500 per day, but typically you're delivering that via the web. And then building out custom training materials for every different group. Expect to pay, I said 10K to 15, but it's probably 5K to 15, depending on if you already have, if this is the second group you're training or not. But the first custom manual you're building is going to take you about 2 to 3 weeks. Your data migration. If it's standard information and we already have something pre-built, which is the case, expect to pay about 3 to 5K. But then as you start to add customizations and new tables, custom tables, those end up being roughly about $400 for each additional table that has to get added. And then when you're going out to a data cleaning service, depending on how much data you're pulling in, because you can get a lot of information from data services, depending on which ones you're buying from. So on the low end, you're probably going to pay around 50 cents a record. On the high end, you're probably going to average around $1 a record, just so you know. But if you're getting like consumer data, you can expect to pay $3 to $5 a record for that because of the amount of information. And it's interesting, if you look at what Google sells or with Facebook will sell you, there's like several hundred things you can find out about people, but obviously you pay for each one. And so that becomes an add-on to the cost of your data cleaning service. Integrations. Most common integrations we see are ERP. Hands down, number one is CRM to ERP, because people want to take their sales history and sales information, product information and quoting and all that wonderful stuff and move it to their CRM so their salespeople are doing it and then having that push back to their accounting and billing system. Second thing we see all the time is marketing automation. If you're not using a marketing automation that's already integrated like Curatio Market to Curatio Sale, but you're using a third-party marketing automation solution, the first thing people want to see is leads coming across into the lead module, additional activity, changing lead scores, things like that. Those are really what, and then you want to push out campaigns from your CRM. So you want to pull out your profile data that's inside your CRM about your contacts and push that to your marketing automation solution. The third thing we see is email integration. Particularly if you're like in healthcare or finance, you may want to do what we do, which is record every email coming across. So this is, we have built out integrations that, we have built out integrations to monitor every email that comes across, find the matching email address in the CRM and store that. So you're guaranteed to have conversations. We see this for most of our healthcare customers, most of our financial service customers are asking for that feature. It's very common. The next two we see a little bit less. E-commerce, if you're selling to business through an e-commerce site, we have a customer right now who sells casters, for example. They've got 2 million of them. But they want to know which products their customers buy. So they come to a website, they buy it without even talking to a salesperson, but then we push back all their name information plus the product information to the CRM. So that's that is like the next one on the list. And then we see 2 use cases for social media. One is really to use it as a communication source. So we have a lot of customers who will now communicate with their customers via LinkedIn or Facebook. And so we see that it needs to get recorded. So that's one of the use cases, is how do I record that information? The second use case we see for social media is through marketing automation, and that is marketing to people through advertising based on profile criteria in things like Facebook. Oops. So again, what drives integration? Well, if it's web service to web service, man, that is the least most expensive thing you can do. If it's web service to API, it gets a little more expensive. And if it's direct to a database, it's very expensive. And then the driver is, do you need real time versus batch? How many objects? Can I get to the actual object, or do I have to traverse a series of relationships? How many fields and how many transformations? Because a lot of times you'll see something like my favorite analogy is QuickBooks. When you actually do a quote or win an opportunity in your CRM, you have 3 places you can push it to. You can push it to an estimate, you can push it to an order, or you can push it to an invoice, and they all sort of work the same way. So again, you push them to any of those, but every one of those has a slightly different set of transformations that have to happen. One of the cool things is that if you spend $1 on your CRM, this is from Nucleus Research, your CRM should return about $8 to you. If you're running it in the cloud, it returns about 27. But if you have it fully integrated to all your systems, it returns about 117. So there's the case right now for why you want to integrate your CRM wherever possible. And so when you talk about add-on solutions, like third-party add-on solutions, expect them to cost about 30 to 60% of the price it costs to build it over 3 years. So if you're buying an add-on e-signature solution that's from the marketplace, you should expect, if it costs them $100,000 to build it, and this is really also depends on how popular it is as a solution. But expect them to charge you somewhere about 30% over 3 years of the cost of them to build it. So over 3 years, expect to pay roughly, 30K. So about 10K a year. And it could go as much as 60K or I'm doing math, 20K a year for the price of that add-on. The other thing you're going to find out is that add-ons, depending on what they do, are sort of limited by the price of the license. So if I've got a product that I'm paying $60 a month for, say Cratio, I'm not going to likely to pay for an add-on that costs me $50 a month. So we find that the price of the CRM license limits the 2 things. It limits which add-ons are available for which CRMs. Because if I'm charging $100 for my add-on product, I may not want to integrate it to certain CRMs because they're too low priced. But it's going to be somewhere between 10% and 50% of the cost of that CRM license, which is effectively the barrier. And that add-on costs, again, are directly related to, how popular is this? How many competing products are there, and what it took to develop it. Those are the 3 drivers that hit you on the add-on costs. Customizations, low code is going to save you a ton of money. Low code customizations, typically processes, building out things, can be I mean, yeah, you just saw Megan did something in literally a half hour, but traditionally you're going to spend, somewhere between a couple hours to a day to build out something in a low code application. And that's why it's about 500 to 1,500 bucks. If you have to do scripting, you're going to pay 3 times more. And so, because it takes 3 times longer. So that's the fine. The low code stuff really does help you save money on the whole thing. Support. Expect to pay roughly, we're seeing administrators being about $85K with benefits right now. And if you're a small organization, you need to expect to have somebody in your organization spend 15 or 20% of their time administering the solution. If you're and small being, I would say under 20. If you're a mid-sized organization, somewhere above 20, but say below 200, expect to have half of a resource dedicated to, we lost the 2 zeros there, Deneen, looks like. So half of a resource in a medium organization will be dedicated to your CRM. And if you're a large enterprise, expect to have 1 to 2 people full-time, and that's over 200 licenses managing your CRM. And support for the product, if it's a cloud product, it's usually included in your license fee. But if you're have a perpetual licensing, expect to pay 20, 25, as high as 35%. And the same thing is true for priority support. Expect to pay 20 to 35% of the cost of the license. And then finally, ongoing continuous improvement. If the first year you spend 100% of the product on the cost of the product, expect the following year to spend about 50% of your first year costs. And then that will drop down to somewhere between 20 to 25% ongoing, just to keep it current and document your current processes and keep everything running smoothly. And so I know I ran through those, so if there's any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat.
Awesome. Thank you, Sam. All right, so we have a few minutes. Our Q&A session will be starting, or literally is starting right now. So any questions that you have related to what Megan talked about or what Sam just discussed, I know we covered a lot of info in the past hour and a half here. So, absorbing it is a task as well, but
And
let
I
us
believe,
know.
Deneen, we've also put a white paper out there on the cost of integration on our website, if I remember.
On the Starfish ETL website.
On Starfish ETL
Yeah.
website, yeah. So if you want to read further about the cost of integrations and why things cost the way they do, you can download that. It's actually a blog, I think, right?
Yes.
Yeah.